Wanderer might just be one of the best budget-friendly decks there is, and you can basically play whatever you want so long as you keep to one simple rule in deck building. Play 21 cheap ramp spells and 40 expensive cards that win the game. I decided to put that to the test and gave myself just 1 hour to build a Maelstrom Wanderer deck from my spare card boxes, then take that deck to my local commander night. Did I get any wins? Well, first onto the deck itself. I sorted through my cards quickly as I had a lot to get through in an hour. I simply sorted cards I found into 2 piles. Does it ramp or does it kill? If not, it was skipped, although I did pull a few cards out for other decks I've been looking for. First thing I did was grab my basics and chose 20 forests, 9 islands and 9 mountains as my mana base. I was hoping to find a lot of green based ramp that can find the other colours, so a ton of forest is key to make sure you don't need any more than this. I pulled out a lot of cards, but about 2/3 of the way through I found a Keruga, which I was so happy to have spare. If we use this card as our companion, this card alone takes all of the card advantage we need and lets us play 40 cards that just kill people. This guided my choices though. I had still pulled out some cheaper rank and had to make sure I could find 20 ramp sources now over 3 mana. I found a good amount of ramp spare, and a lot of it was cards I have used in my main Wanderer deck that have at some point been relegated to the vault box after being taken out. A lot of this is still fairly good but just missing the cut. Drover, Invasion, Cultivate, Reflection, Survey, Harrow, Surge and Stomper. I also found duplicates of several ramp spells I still play in my main deck. Emoti is still the best card in the deck and always ramps since all of our cheap cards ramp. Inga's Vigilance cannot be underestimated, and Descent ramps into a Wanderer by itself. I also found my Rift Sower and Search for Tomorrow, which, as you know, suspend spells are very good with Keruga. I also found Road to Ruin, which is a little slow for my main build, but here I'm happy to have a ramp spell that offers some desperately needed interaction alongside it. Finally, my last few ramp spells are not perfect, but I only had an hour. Magnifying Glass and Rejuvenator don't offer much else for their mana cost, and Crystal isn't bad for 4 mana, but I'd have been happier to find something that could fix our mana. Overall, it's a solid selection that came into 21 cards, plenty to make sure we'll have a few ramp spells in time. Now for winning the game. This is where the budget can often explode with Wanderer, as there are lots of fancy mythics that reap your wallet. But there's still a lot of good options without spending much. I found myself adding a few mind control effects such as Confiscate, Embolus's Clutches and Lay Claim, as you can always steal someone else's expensive threat, or if you want to be really cheeky you can count these as ramp towards a Wanderer if you steal a land. Again, there's a few hits from Wanderer's past here, with Hidetsugu, Avatar, Firelaf and Emissary being cards I've played before, as well as a few duplicates of cards my main deck has, such as the Titan Duo. From there, this is certainly a harder section to fill, but thanks to Wanderer granting our team haste, we just want some big bodies, so an 8/8 Gear Hulk or a Scary Eldrazi are good enough. This section is far from perfect, as we include a few card advantage cards we don't need like our Sphinxes, but they can still hit for a decent chunk of damage in the air. The general verdict is anything either evasive or large is a good bet for winning the game, and this is where we ended up. The one exception is Release to the Wind, which is a bad Cascade target, but if you cast it on a Wanderer already on the board, you get 2 Cascade triggers for just 3 mana, so it earned a spot. Finally is the secret third section. See, you can play ramp or cards that win the game, but if something does both of those things, all the better. Several of these cards I still play in my main deck for their ability to ramp on early turns, but when we hit them from Cascade, they can do some damage. Tanuki, Artistry and Giant fill this role well, but the Cascade spells aren't to be ignored. If you keep to the rules of the deck, all of our ramp will be cheap cards, so cards like Phoenix, Recluse and Party will hit a ramp spell in almost every situation, meaning say a turn 3 Cultivate can lead into a turn 4 Phoenix that finds us a ramp spell. Pretty nifty. Beyond that, Alex Methes is an easy 12/12 with all of our Cascade casts. This fish can be foretold when we can't use our mana on turn 2 and then bring treasures later, and likewise Outburst can turn into a treasure on turn 2 if we draw it. But on Cascade it removes something and draws us a card. Not ideal compared to say a Magma Opus, but I didn't find one of those. I mostly slot these in the win the game slot, as it's a bare minimum that they can contribute to that while also helping increasing our ramp consistency. Finally, back to mana. 38 basics are fine, but I do believe this is one deck Temple is well justified in, as it can lead to a Wanderer a turn earlier, so it takes us up to 39 lands. Beyond that, anything I found in our colours made it more or less, which was a mix of tap lands, check lands, my favourite hideaway cards, and thankfully a spare command tower. 38 basics are fine, but a little extra fixing is always worthwhile. And the last thing I want to touch with in actually playing the deck is the Mulligan strategy, because this is very important to make it work. 20 ramp is great, but only if we actually get them in our hand. In this deck, I aggressively mulligan to find 1 or preferably 2 ramp sources and 3 lands in every single hand, and I will happily mulligan to 5 and even 4 if we haven't got anything else. A hand of 2 lands and 3 big creatures is worse than a hand of 2 lands and 2 ramp spells. It's worth the mulligan, so aggressively mulligan if you want this deck to work. And that's the deck. It came in at just under $25, cheaper than a Precon. But how did it do? Well, I recorded my first Cascade trigger.
Cast Maelstrom Wanderer. Search for tomorrow. Land. Harrow, hell yeah.
Which was bad. However, this picture of my board state at the end might persuade you that the game went otherwise thereafter. I played 3 games in total. 2 of them were against my usual playgroup playing their regular decks, nothing sculpted to balance against my budget. Wanderer is simply powerful enough to just do its thing if people let it. Some untimely interaction can set you back, but the Wanderer will always be looming. I didn't get a picture of my second game, but my deck had less than 40 cards at the end of it, so suffice to say it went well. I wasn't sure this little experiment was going to work when I began this video, but I'm glad it paid out. I played a third game the next week in a different pod, and the deck did pretty well, and it was a very close game until they managed to get 36 counters on an Allender, and killed it. We didn't find much trample or board wipe, so there wasn't much we can do against 37 tokens. I did find in this build, because our payoffs are worse because it's on a budget, that means that we found the life game was a bit more useful and that the games tended to go a bit longer. We weren't just going to end the game the turn we cast Maelstrom Wanderer, which means if I'm playing in a lower power playgroup, I can pull this deck out, still enjoy Wanderer, but no, I'm not just going to pug stomp everyone. It was kind of just what I was looking for. But what's next for the deck? Clearly this deck isn't optimised, and you could spend a few years scrolling through Scryfall to find some improvements on the budget. But that isn't my plan. I've decided to leave the deck intact with one restriction. I'm bringing this deck back to the kitchen table style of deck building. I'm only going to add cards to this deck I receive in sealed products, whether that be from drafting, prize packs, buying another commander deck and having some spares, or whatever. I don't buy boxes, only singles, so I expect this to be a slow process, but given the deck seems to work, I'm in no rush. A few cards I will be looking to cut are Goblin Dark Dwellers, Wingreader Sphinx, Sandstone Oracle and Stormbrift Draken. Pretty sharpish, but we'll see if we find anything better. So why not try doing this yourself? There's a budget of $25, but how about a budget of 0 if you just have all the cards in your collection already? Maybe you're new and this isn't an option, and in which case this build is a great starting point to jump off from. If you don't like the look of any cards, take them out, find something new. You could also try this for any commander really. In fact, about half of my commander decks start the same way, but I think Wanderer is truly made to be an effective place to dump your bulk rares and have them shine. Thanks so much for watching and helping me reach 1,000 subscribers. There's much more to come from here. Take care.